In the days before the flood, when the earth was still in its primal state, and the judgment of the Most High was about to unfold, a man stood out among the sons of men. This was no ordinary man. Chosen by God himself, Enoch was a righteous figure, wise beyond measure, a master craftsman, and a servant of the Almighty, whose heart aligned perfectly with divine will. His name became known not only for his earthly deeds, but for what happened to him in the heavenly realms. Imagine being chosen to journey beyond the veil of this world to witness the very secrets of the heavens themselves. Enoch was granted this unimaginable privilege. He was taken up to the highest stations of the Lord, where he beheld sights that no human eye had ever gazed upon, the vast expanse of God's realm shining brighter than the sun, the many-eyed servants of the Lord who radiated unearthly light, and the incomprehensible songs of cherubim echoing through boundless space. What did Enoch truly witness? What did he learn from the mysterious realms that await beyond the stars? As he recorded his vision in the second book of Enoch, the truth of the 10 heavens was revealed, a truth that is still waiting to be uncovered. But be warned, what Enoch saw will both awe and terrify you. Do you feel the thrill, yet ready to step into this divine journey? With Enoch comment 777 below, if you're prepared to uncover the mysteries of the heavens. Let's dive deeper into what Enoch experienced in a realm far beyond anything we can imagine. Enoch explained the 10 heavens. What he saw will terrify you. In those days, when the world was still young and the mysteries of heaven seemed far beyond mortal grasp, there lived a man whose years had already stretched long upon the earth. Enoch recounted how after reaching the span of 165 years, he was blessed with the birth of his son Methuselah, a name that would echo through generations. Even after this joyful chapter, life did not quickly fade from him. He continued to walk the earth for another 2 centuries, until the sum of his days reached 365 years. What might it feel like to carry so many seasons within your bones, to have watched the sun rise and fall over countless harvests, yet still sense that something far greater awaited? It was on the first day of the month, while he lingered alone in the quiet of his dwelling, that Enoch chose to rest upon his bed. Sleep gently overcame him, and with it came a deep, unsettling disturbance that gripped his very heart. Though his eyes were closed, tears found their way out, tracing the lines of his face. Such was the weight of this sorrow that even within the dream he could not comprehend its cause, nor predict the shadow it cast over his spirit. Could it be that your soul, too, has ever trembled with an unexplainable grief, hinting at divine mysteries just beyond your reach? Then, as though the fabric between heaven and earth had been delicately torn, Enoch beheld a sight that no mortal eyes had ever witnessed. Before him stood 2 towering figures so immense and glorious that nothing upon this earth could be likened to them. Their very faces radiated with brilliance, shining like the noonday sun. Their eyes blazed with a fierce living light, and as they parted their lips, fire itself seemed to dance forth, carrying songs of indescribable beauty. Have you ever imagined encountering beings so wondrous that their mere presence might cause your heart to both sing and shrink in awe? Their garments gleamed with shifting hues, rich purples intertwined with glints of silver, while their wings shimmered brighter than the purest gold. Even their hands outshone freshly fallen snow. These heavenly messengers stood solemnly at the head of Enoch's bed and called him by name with voices that resonated through his very bones. Jolted awake, Enoch opened his eyes to see them still there. No illusion of a dream, but a living reality standing before him. In reverence and alarm, he greeted them, though fear quickly overtook him, so much so that his very face transformed under the weight of terror. Have you ever wondered how you might respond if confronted face to face by the might of heaven? Sensing his dread, the radiant beings spoke gently, yet with authority. Take heart, Enoch. Do not let fear rule you. The eternal God, whose throne is established beyond the stars, has sent us to you. Today, you shall ascend with us into the realms above. But first speak to your sons, and all your household instruct them in all they must continue to do in your absence. Let none seek you until the Lord himself returns you to them. Their words echoed the Lord's frequent assurance throughout Scripture. Fear not, for I am with you, Isaiah 41:10, reminding us that divine encounters, though terrifying, are often laced with tender purpose. Wasting no time, Enoch obeyed their command with trembling urgency. He rose from his bed, stepped out of the solitude of his chamber, and crossed to the doors of his house. There he summoned his beloved sons Methuselah, Regime, and God, drawing them close as the solemn gravity of the moment pressed upon him. Can you picture yourself in that hushed gathering, sensing that your father stood on the threshold of eternity? With earnest eyes, he recounted to them the marvels those majestic messengers had revealed. Listen carefully, my children. He implored, his voice thick with emotion. I know not to what place I go, or what fate may await me. But this I charge you, turn not your hearts away from the living God. Even though many around you chase after worthless things, after gods who did not shape the heavens or set the earth upon its firm foundation. These will vanish, as will all who bow to them. And as he looked upon the faces of his sons, the future of his line, Enoch continued, May the Lord strengthen your hearts to walk always in his fear, for it is written that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Proverbs 9:10. And now, dear children, let no one set out to search for me until the Lord himself sees fit to bring me back to you. Could such a moment teach us even now to cherish divine mysteries over human certainties, and to anchor our hope not in idols of this fleeting world, but in the eternal God who calls us upward? And so it unfolded, just as the mighty visitors had declared. After Enoch poured out his soul to his sons, speaking tenderly of faithfulness and warning them against the idols that would soon crumble like dust, the moment of awe arrived. Without delay, those dazzling beings whose mere voices could stir the marrow of any mortal stretched forth their radiant wings. They lifted Enoch gently, yet with irresistible power, carrying him upward into realms that no human foot had ever tread. Imagine for a heartbeat what it would be like if your very body were caught up by angels soaring through the open skies, leaving the earth and all its familiar worries to vanish beneath a sea of clouds. As they ascended higher and higher, Enoch felt the breath of the wind grow thinner and more ethereal. Soon the swirling currents settled into a stillness as he realized he was no longer within the world he knew. There, upon the first heaven, they set him down upon the soft backs of the clouds. The very floor beneath him felt alive, like resting upon gentle waves that hummed with hidden life. When he lifted his eyes, he beheld something even more marvelous. A vast expanse stretching above, glowing with the faint whisper of what he later recognized as the ether, a delicate veil separating mortal air from the deeper mysteries of heaven. Could you keep your composure if you suddenly found yourself standing at the threshold of such wonders? The angels did not allow his awe to idle long. They guided his gaze to a spectacle so immense it defied reason, before him lay a sea so great that it dwarfed every ocean he had ever known on earth. Its rolling depths glimmered with colors that mortal waters had never dared wear, and each wave seemed to sing with a voice older than the mountains. What might such a sea contain secrets of creation itself waiting to be stirred? Then in solemn grandeur, the angels led Enoch still deeper into this heavenly domain, introducing him to August, beings who seemed woven from starlight itself. They presented before his astonished eyes the elders and rulers of the stellar orders, dignitaries of the cosmos, whose very bearing testified to the authority entrusted to them. Among them were 200 angels, each one tasked with governing the stars, tending to their courses, commanding their brightness, ensuring they dance their appointed waltz across the firmament. These angels flew effortlessly on splendid wings, sweeping around those who voyaged the starry seas, orchestrating the celestial ballet that mortals see only dimly as constellations. Does it not make you wonder what silent guardians hover over our world, maintaining the delicate harmony that we so often take for granted? Then Enoch's eyes were drawn downward, where mysteries of another kind unfurled. Beneath him lay immense chambers, the treasure houses of snow, vast repositories that held every flake destined to grace the earth. Mighty angels stood vigilant over these terrible storehouses, their faces set with a solemn purpose as they managed the flow of heaven's chill breath. Nearby rose the billowing clouds, drifting out from and returning into their hidden vaults as if breathing in rhythm with the will of God. Have you ever paused to consider that each gentle snowfall or gathering storm might be carefully weighed and dispatched by such heavenly custodians? And there was more still. They showed him yet another treasury, this one filled with dew so pure and rich it glistened like olive oil poured fresh from the press. Its appearance was unlike anything of earth, shimmering as if woven from all the blooms ever sown across the fields. Around these marvels, countless angels stood watch, ensuring each storehouse opened and closed exactly as ordained. Their movements were deliberate, every gesture echoing the precise intentions of the Most High. Could it be that even the morning dew upon your window, or the sudden burst of a flower in your garden, is the result of angels carefully unlocking these secret vaults? Thus, Enoch, once a man who merely tended the land and walked among his family, now stood amid councils and chambers of a realm far beyond mortal reach. Through his eyes, we glimpse a truth echoed later in Scripture, that the heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Psalm 19:1. Perhaps, if we truly grasped how intimately heaven governs even the smallest wonders of earth, our hearts would brim over with reverence each time we felt a raindrop or watched a star flicker in the velvet night. Once again, the radiant beings who guided Enoch spread forth their magnificent wings and bore him yet higher, lifting him from the marvels of the first heaven into mysteries even deeper and far more somber. They carried him gracefully upward until he found himself standing at the threshold of the second heaven. But as soon as his eyes adjusted, Enoch's heart recoiled, for what lay before him was unlike the splendor he had just beheld. Here, a darkness reigned so thick, so utterly oppressive, that it seemed to swallow all light, surpassing any shadow known to earth. Can you imagine peering into such an abyss, feeling it claw at the edges of your soul, as if eager to draw you into its desolate grasp? Within this dread gloom, Enoch beheld a sight that chilled him to the marrow. Bound in torment, suspended as though by unseen chains, were countless prisoners. Their forms hung there in silent horror, waiting their hollow eyes fixed on some distant dread, anticipating a judgment vast and inescapable. They seemed locked in eternal vigil, each face etched with the terror of what was still to come. Does it strike you that even in realms beyond sight, there are souls trapped in anguish, yearning desperately for a mercy they once scorned? Among these captives were angels themselves, but twisted into shapes dark as the void that enveloped them. Unlike the shining hosts who had escorted Enoch through the heavens, these beings wore a gloom deeper than night. Their very presence radiated despair, and they wept ceaselessly. Hour after hour, their mournful cries rose up, echoing through the cavernous darkness, a sorrow so profound it seemed to shake the very fabric of that realm. What agony must weigh upon a spirit created for light, now chained in unending lament? Stricken by both fear and compassion, Enoch turned to the glorious men who still stood by his side. Why, he asked, voice trembling, are these wretches tortured without end? What have they done to merit such relentless anguish? The heavenly escorts met his questioning gaze with grave expressions. These, they explained, are the apostates of God, the ones who scorned his commands and chose instead to follow their own counsel. They turned aside from his ways and pledged themselves to their prince, who even now lies bound in the depths of the fifth heaven. It was a solemn revelation, reminding us of ancient warnings echoed throughout Scripture. They exchanged the truth about God for a lie and worshipped and served created things rather than the Creator. Romans 1:25. Might not the same pride that led these angels astray still whisper within human hearts today? Moved by a profound pity, Enoch watched as some among those weeping spirits seemed to strain toward him, their dim eyes catching flickers of the old radiance they once knew. Astonishingly, they saluted him, acknowledging this mortal who had been granted passage through their prison. And then, with voices raw from endless weeping, they implored, "Man of God, intercede for us. Pray to the Lord on our behalf." Imagine, for a breath, standing in Enoch's place, mortal flesh, trembling before immortal wretches, their desperate pleas ringing in your ears. What prayer could you possibly offer that would unbind such ancient chains? Stunned by their request, Enoch responded with all the humility of one suddenly small beneath the weight of eternity. "Who am I," he said softly, "that I should pray for angels? I am but a mortal man. I do not know the path ahead of me, nor what fate shall soon overtake me, nor who there might be to lift up prayers for my own soul." His words hung heavy in the darkness, a reminder that even when one walks amid divine mysteries, the burden of human frailty is never far. Yet as he stood there, Enoch could not shake the sorrow that pressed upon him for these fallen ones. Does it not stir something within you to think that beings once clothed in celestial brilliance now hang here in utter ruin, longing for prayers they cannot voice themselves? Perhaps it whispers a lesson into our own fleeting days to heed God's ways with trembling reverence, lest we too drift toward a shadow from which there may be no return. Then once more, those luminous men, whose very presence seemed to vibrate with the music of distant worlds, took Enoch by the hand and lifted him yet again, soaring above the solemn realm of the second heaven. They ascended with graceful urgency until they placed him gently upon the realm of the third heaven, a place that, from the moment his feet touched its ground, overwhelmed his senses with wonders beyond any dream a mortal could dare. Looking downward from this new height, Enoch beheld landscapes so richly adorned that no earthly meadow, no hidden grove, no king's orchard could rival their beauty. Everywhere he cast his eyes, there burst forth the produce of these celestial places, fruits and grains, flowers, and leaves of such exquisite sweetness and goodness that even the very air seemed to throb with fragrant joy. Have you ever stepped into a garden after rain and felt a sweetness so alive it seemed to sing? Imagine that, then multiply it by eternity's own delight. He wandered among countless flowering trees, each branch heavy with fruit that glowed like small lanterns, exuding perfumes that made the soul want to dance. Their scents rose up in bubbling waves of exaltation, and at the very heart of this divine orchard stood the tree of life itself, a vision of such ineffable beauty that language threatened to betray it. Here was the sacred place upon which the Lord himself rests when he ascends into paradise. Its form was like no tree of earth. All around it gleamed with gold-like splendor, deep vermilion, and a living fire that seemed to gently play upon its leaves. It covered everything with an otherworldly canopy, as if the breath of God still lingered upon it from creation's first dawn. Could you keep from falling to your knees if your eyes beheld such a sight? As Enoch moved closer, he saw that this one tree produced every kind of fruit imaginable. Its roots stretched down into the garden that lay at the very ends of the earth, binding heaven and the distant soil in a secret embrace. Paradise itself, he realized, dwelt in a mysterious space, balanced between corruptibility and incorruptibility, standing at a threshold where decay dared not fully enter, and yet life bloomed more vibrantly than anywhere else in the cosmos. Two springs flowed out from this hallowed ground, sending forth streams of honey and milk, which then divided and danced onward as gentle rivers of oil and wine. These four streams glided peacefully through paradise, winding their way quietly into the Eden below, sustaining it in a perfect circle of life, a rhythm as sure and faithful as the rising of the sun or the breath of the sea. Does it not humble you to imagine that somewhere in God's creation flows a place untouched by ruin, guarded by such streams of pure blessing? There in this garden, every tree flourished with fruit. There was not a single barren limb. Every blade of grass, every petal of every blossom seemed woven with the promise of divine favor. 300 angels, radiant beyond any dawn, stood vigil here. They sang without ceasing voices like crystal waters, melodies twined together in endless worship. Their song never dimmed, nor did their devotion waver. Day and hour held no sway over them. They served the Lord in pure adoration, filling the very air with harmonies that would make a mortal heart ache with longing. Overcome by the sweetness of this place, Enoch exclaimed, "How very sweet is this place!" The words tumbled from his lips as though drawn out by the very music of the garden. His angelic guides turned to him and said, "This place, O Enoch, has been prepared for the righteous, for those who endure the harshest offenses from souls that seek only to wound them, for those who turn their eyes from iniquity, who judge rightly and walk with clean hearts before the Lord. For those who feed the hungry clothe, the naked lift up the fallen, and protect the orphaned who have none to defend them. For these who live blameless before God, serving Him alone, this garden awaits as their everlasting inheritance." Could you hear such a promise and not yearn to live a life worthy of its gates? But the journey was not yet complete. Those two men led Enoch away from the joy-drenched groves and carried him up along the northern reaches of the heavens, where a new horror awaited. Here, they revealed to him a place so fearsome that even the darkness of the second heaven seemed gentle by comparison. All around was cruel blackness, pierced by savage torches that sputtered with murky, angry fire. There was no true light, only flames that offered no warmth, flickering among thick shadows that clung like a suffocating shroud. A river of fire twisted its way, through this desolate land, sending forth sparks that danced with a mocking life. The entire place was alive with flame, yet also bound in frost patches of biting ice, mingled with the searing heat, a torment of thirst and shivering that never ended. The bonds here were especially cruel, and everywhere Enoch looked fearsome angels stood guard. They bore weapons that seemed forged from wrath itself, their eyes hard with merciless intent. Have you ever imagined a place so entirely abandoned by comfort, where even the air itself seemed to judge you? Stricken with dread, Enoch cried out, "Woe, woe, how very terrible is this place!" The words broke from him like a wail. His guides answered solemnly, "This, O Enoch, is prepared for those who dishonor God, those who upon earth commit sins against the very nature. He set defiling innocence in ways whispered of only in myths. It is for those who practice vile enchantments and weave spells born of devils. For the boastful who take pride in evil, who steal, who deceive, who stir up calamities, who spread envy, hatred, lust, and bloodshed. It is for those accursed souls who traffic in the theft of men's very spirits." Then they spoke of yet darker hearts, those who, seeing the poor, rob them to fatten their own coffers, caring nothing for the wounds they cause. Those who, while they could feed the starving, let them waste away, who could clothe the naked, but choose instead to turn their eyes and hearts cold. Those who never sought their Creator, but bowed before lifeless idols, statues of stone and wood, deaf and blind, crafted by human hands, yet worshipped as though divine. For all such as these, this place stands as their eternal inheritance. And in that awful moment, gazing upon a destiny carved out by human cruelty and pride, Enoch felt the weight of eternity press close upon him. Perhaps even now, such a vision warns us, urging us to walk humbly, to love mercy, and to remember that every small act of compassion shines brighter in God's sight than 1,000 hollow rituals. What would it mean for you right now to choose the path that leads not into the flames of that northern desolation, but instead toward the gardens where the Lord Himself walks among the trees? Then once more, those luminous beings, whose every movement seemed to ripple with the authority of heaven itself, took Enoch by the hand and led him higher still. They rose through veils of shining air until he found himself set upon the threshold of the fourth heaven. What awaited him there was a revelation so vast that it seemed to swallow all lesser wonders. From this vantage, Enoch beheld the great march of the sun and moon, their mighty circuits across the heavens. He stood as though upon the ramparts of the cosmos itself, permitted to look down upon the intricate workings of time and light. He watched their successive goings, the rays pouring out like rivers of liquid brilliance, weaving patterns across the vault of the sky. Can you imagine standing at such a height, where days and nights themselves parade by like solemn processions? There, Enoch measured with wonder their movements, observing closely the difference in their glory. It was clear that the sun's radiance far surpassed the gentle glow of the moon. The sun sped along its immense circular path, carried on wheels that moved swifter than any wind he had ever felt upon the earth. Wheels that turned with marvelous speed, never pausing for rest, not by day nor by night. And with each passage and return, it was flanked by 4 great stars, their silent grandeur trailing beneath them, a retinue of lesser lights. Beneath each of these mighty stars rested 1,000 others, so that altogether 8,000 stars marched daily with the sun across the sky. Does it stir something within you to think that even our familiar daylight is accompanied by such a hidden royal host? Attending this glorious procession were also legions upon legions of angels, 15 myriads who served by day. By night, as dusk's velvet curtain was drawn across the heavens, 1,000 angels of mighty wings surged forth, with still more angels journeying before the sun's wheel, straight into the awaiting flames. And 100 angels took upon themselves the solemn duty to kindle the sun, setting it ablaze anew. What majesty might we glimpse if only our eyes could pierce the daylight's veil and see these servants of fire at their sacred labor. And Enoch beheld still stranger creatures, marvelous beings named phoenixes and Kal Kadri. They flew near the sun, guardians and companions of its celestial blaze. They stood upon feet like lions, their tails coiled with feral grace, while their heads bore the savage lines of crocodiles. Their bodies shimmered with colors that danced like rainbows, shifting and bending the light. Each one was enormous, spanning 900 measures, and they bore wings like angels, 12 to each, which beat with the breath of eternity. These extraordinary attendants carried both heat and dew, wherever God commanded, keeping creation in delicate balance. Have you ever wondered if each gentle morning mist or burst of summer warmth is guided by unseen hands like theirs? Thus the sun carried out its ordered course, rising under heaven, setting beneath the earth, its rays reaching ceaselessly, even in hidden places. Those radiant men then brought Enoch eastward to the very gates of the sun itself, the great portals through which it passed, governed by the cycles of seasons, by the measured circuits of months, by the hours woven together to complete the year. Before him stood 6 immense gates, each measuring 61 stadia and a quarter more. Enoch, with a mind sharpened by divine guidance, measured them truly and understood this was how the sun traversed from east to west, becoming balanced across all the months. When its journey forward reached its fullness, the sun would turn back again through these gates, according to the stately sequence of the seasons, until the year found its completion after 4 such turns. Then those luminous guides brought Enoch to the west, where he beheld 6 corresponding gates openings, prepared for the sun's descent. It was here the sun vanished beyond the horizon, carrying away its fierce light, its brightness retreating beneath the earth. And since the crown of its shining remained ever in heaven before the Lord, it was guarded there by 400 angels, while the sun rolled on its wheels below the ground, pausing for 7 great hours in the night. Imagine, even when darkness wraps around us, the sun is still on its holy path beneath our feet. Half of its circuit lay hidden under the earth. Then, as the night neared its 8th hour, the sun approached the eastern verge once more, bringing with it its crown of radiance. At that moment, it burst forth blazing brighter than any earthly fire. Then those wondrous elements of the sun, the phoenixes and haladry, broke into jubilant song. Their voices rose so high and clear that every bird across the earth fluttered in instinctive joy, their wings beating praise. Together, they sang of the giver of light, who rises to illuminate the world. From their chorus emerged the morning god, the very rays of dawn shaping themselves anew. The sun of the earth then went forth, receiving once more its splendor, and 2 streams of brilliance lit up the face of all creation. Those heavenly men showed Enoch the precise calculation of the sun's movement, explaining how these vast gates measured the hours of each year. They spoke of the sun's immense creation, how its grand circuit spanned 28 years before beginning again. And then they revealed to him the workings of the moon, 12 mighty gates, crowned from west to east, by which it entered and departed at appointed times. They recited how the moon traveled through each gate 31 days, in the first, 31, in the second, 30, in the third, and so forth, a careful dance that repeated until all the months were fulfilled. Through these intricate passages, the moon completed 354 days, in its year lacking by 12 days the fullness of the solar circuit, these being the lunar epochs that filled out the mysteries of time. Thus, the vast circle encompassed 532 years, with each quarter day omitted for 3 years and fulfilled exactly on the fourth. Could you stand among these revelations and not feel your heart quake at the breathtaking precision of God's order? For 3 years, those extra moments stood outside the heavenly reckoning, not added to the sum of days shifting the calendar toward new seasons until finally time was gathered up in dominion once again. When the sun finished its course through the western gates, it returned eastward, drawing back to the light. Thus, day and night, it moved about the heavenly circles, lower than all other orbits, yet swifter than the winds, than spirits, than the flying elements, and angels with their 6 wings. It traced a 7-fold course in 19 years. And amid all these marvels, Enoch looked up and saw armed soldiers of heaven serving the Lord, with timbrels and delicate organs, their voices never ceasing. Their music was of such sweetness, such layered harmonies, that no mortal tongue could ever describe it, nor any mind fully grasp it. Imagine standing there, your very soul caught up in a song so exquisite it seemed to remake your heart. So wonderful and marvelous was this chorus of angels that Enoch stood utterly delighted, lost in rapture as he listened. Then once again, those luminous men who carried with them the hush of hidden worlds took Enoch by the hand and bore him higher. They rose above the ordered courses of the sun and moon until they reached the mysterious realm of the 5th heaven. As they set him gently down, Enoch's eyes widened in wonder and growing sorrow at the sight that unfolded before him. Spread out before him was a vast multitude, countless in number, who stood like silent sentinels across the expanse. These were soldiers, mighty beings known as the Grigori. Though they bore the form of men, their stature far exceeded that of even the greatest giants whispered of in ancient tales. But their size was not what struck Enoch most painfully. Their faces were drawn and withered, as if sorrow itself had sucked the very color from their features. Their mouths were sealed in unbroken silence, and across this entire heaven there rose no song, no hymn, no cry of worship to the Most High. Can you imagine stepping into a realm so hushed, where the air itself seemed heavy with grief, and not a single voice dared to rise in praise? Troubled by this haunting spectacle, Enoch turned to his radiant guides, his words edged with perplexity and pity. Why, he asked, are these beings so terribly withered? Why do their faces wear such melancholy, their mouths forever closed? And why is there no service here before the throne of the Lord? For how could a heaven stand so still, void of the glad exultations that elsewhere filled the celestial realms? The 2 men looked upon Enoch with a gravity that made the very light around them seem to dim. These, they said, are the Grigori watchers who once stood proudly in the Lord's own councils. But they together, with their prince Satanael, rejected the Lord of light. Their hearts turned from his glory, and so they were cast down from their place. Those you saw earlier imprisoned in the deep darkness of the 2nd heaven are bound there for similar rebellion, but it began here. And as Enoch listened, they unfolded for him a story older than many stars. Long ago, 3 among these watchers descended from the throne of the Lord to the place called Ermin upon the earth. There they gazed upon the daughters of men and saw how beautiful they were. Overcome by desire, they abandoned their holy vows, bonds as sacred as the breath of God, and took mortal women as wives. In doing so, they polluted the earth with corruption and violence. From these forbidden unions were born giants, towering beings filled with enmity and lawlessness, who trampled the ways of righteousness. It was then that God, whose judgments are as steadfast as the pillars of heaven, rendered his mighty verdict against them. These Grigori were condemned, marked by sorrow, their faces now forever etched with mourning. They lingered here, grieving not only for themselves, but also for their brethren bound in deeper darkness. They would await the day of the Lord's great reckoning, when final judgment would sweep across all creation. Could you stand among them and not feel a tremor of fear, realizing how swiftly even angels can fall when pride and lust eclipse devotion? Moved by compassion and the weight of all he had witnessed, Enoch stepped forward toward these silent watchers, daring to address them. "I have seen your brethren," he said, his voice both gentle and trembling. "I have beheld their works and their torments, the anguish that binds them in the deep places of the earth. I prayed on their behalf, but the Lord has decreed that they remain there imprisoned beneath, until the heavens and the earth, as we know them, pass away forever." Then Enoch's eyes swept over the silent multitude, his heart burdened by a question that seemed to spill from his very soul. "Why do you linger here, my brothers? Why do you not stand in service before the face of the Lord? Why do you hold back your offerings of worship, risking his full displeasure? Was it shame that held them mute, or some deeper wound that chained their voices?" His words, fragile though they seemed, against the backdrop of eternity, did not vanish into the void. Instead, the Grigori turned their weary eyes upon him, and something within them stirred. They listened intently, as though Enoch's admonition cracked open the hushed vaults of their remorse. Then slowly, they began to speak to the four great ranks in heaven, their voices awakening from long dormancy. Suddenly, as if heaven itself had leaned close to witness, four trumpets blared together with a mighty harmonious cry. The sound swept through the fifth heaven like a cleansing wind. In that instant, the Grigori broke forth into song, one unified, aching voice, rising pitifully yet beautifully before the throne of God. Their melody was woven of regret and hope, sorrow and longing, and it soared upward, filling the heights of the heaven with a lament that surely reached the very heart of the Creator. Imagine for a moment standing there with Enoch, watching these once proud watchers pour out their souls in such a mournful harmony. Could you listen to such a song born of rebellion, chastening, and the fragile spark of new humility, and not feel your own spirit bend beneath its weight? Then, as if lifting him upon the breath of eternity itself, those radiant men carried Enoch even higher, bearing him upward to the sixth heaven. When at last they set him down, he stood surrounded by a brilliance so overwhelming it seemed the very air was made of living fire. Before him stretched 7 great bands of angels, hosts of dazzling beings arrayed in splendid ranks that stretched as far as the spirit could reach. Their appearance was more glorious than anything Enoch had yet beheld. Their faces shone with a brightness that outmatched even the blazing sun, their countenances glistening like polished gold set aflame by God's own hand. Yet in all their beauty and majesty, there was not the slightest difference among them, not in face, nor in their graceful bearing, nor in the flowing garments that adorned them. They moved as though of a single will united in purpose and purity. Could you stand in such a congregation without feeling your heart tremble, knowing you were surrounded by beings untouched by the divisions and envies that stain the earth? As Enoch looked on in awe, he began to understand that these were no ordinary angels. These shining multitudes made the heavenly orders, They charted the mysterious courses of the stars and observed the moon's changing phases, carefully measuring the sun's majestic revolutions. They were the silent governors of creation's vast machinery, ensuring the good order of the world below. And when their watchful eyes perceived wrongdoing among men or spirits, they issued commandments and instructions to correct the course, maintaining the balance of all things. What might it mean for our daily choices if we remembered that heaven itself records and responds to every shadow that passes through our hearts? All the while, these glorious beings lifted up songs of sweet and powerful praise. Their voices rose in waves of melody that filled the vast reaches of the sixth heaven, pouring out as countless hymns before the face of the Lord. Their music was woven of joy and sacred delight, a ceaseless celebration of His infinite goodness. Can you imagine hearing such a chorus, a sound so holy it would make every sorrow flee from your spirit? In this exalted realm, Enoch also saw the archangels mighty above other angels. These were appointed to weigh and measure all life, both in heaven and upon the earth. Among them stood angels set over the seasons and the march of years, who guided time like gentle shepherds, leading their flocks through hidden pastures. There were angels who ruled over the rivers and the wide, restless seas, ensuring their currents obeyed the ancient bounds set by God. Others watched over the fruits of the earth, commanding trees and vines to yield their blessings. Still, others guarded every blade of grass, nurturing the tender growth that feeds all living creatures. Does it not stir your wonder to know that even the humble stalks waving in a field are cared for by hands unseen, guided by wills wholly devoted to the Most High? Then Enoch's eyes were drawn to yet more marvels among them. There were angels who wrote down every soul of mankind, recording each person's deeds and the full span of their lives, inscribing all before the very face of the Lord. Nothing escaped their quills, not a whispered kindness, not a hidden cruelty, not a secret sorrow. Could you walk through your days differently if you pictured celestial scribes gently noting your every choice, your every act of love or neglect? Amid these radiant legions were also wondrous beings beyond earthly reckoning, 6 phoenixes with their flames of resurrection, 6 cherubim whose very presence seemed to pulse with divine mystery, and 6 six-winged ones whose wings beat with the rhythm of eternity. Together, they lifted up a single voice in endless song. Enoch tried to grasp the full splendor of their music, but found it impossible. It was as if the melody was too vast, too sacred to be contained by mortal comprehension. Theirs was a harmony that astonished the mind and made the spirit bow in reverence. There before the Lord's footstool, all these hosts rejoiced, their praises cascading like rivers of living light. And Enoch stood among them, a lone man clothed in fragile flesh, his soul awash in a joy so profound it seemed to melt the very marrow of his being. Perhaps it was a glimpse of what the psalmist meant when he declared, "In your presence is fullness of joy. At your right hand are pleasures forevermore." Psalm 16:11. If such wonders await the faithful, how might it change the way we endure the small trials of our days? Then once more, those 2 luminous men shimmering with the majesty of realms beyond, thought lifted Enoch up from the breathtaking hosts of the 6th heaven and carried him even higher. As they passed into the 7th heaven, a brilliance struck him that seemed to pierce to the very core of his being. All around him unfolded a radiance so vast, so consuming, it was as if he had stepped into the very heart of living light. Here he beheld fiery armies of great archangels whose ranks moved with such precise harmony that creation itself seemed to breathe by their order. There were incorporeal forces, powers without form, yet more real than stone or flesh, as well as dominions, orders, and mighty governments of heaven. Cherubim flanked the heights with their regal watch, and seraphim soared upon tongues of flame. Thrones of unimaginable dignity stood immovable, while near them were the many-eyed ones whose gaze seemed to span eternity. 9 glorious regiments arrayed themselves in perfect stations of light, each bearing mysteries that no mortal tongue could fully utter. What would it feel like to stand among such blazing sanctuaries of power, where every glance might reveal truths that would shatter the heart with awe? Overwhelmed by the grandeur, Enoch felt terror seize him. His knees weakened, his spirit quailed, and his whole body trembled violently. It was as though his mortal frame might dissolve under the sheer holiness that poured over him. Sensing his dread, the 2 men who had been his steadfast guides took him by the hand and led him forward, whispering with gentle firmness, "Have courage, Enoch. Do not fear." Their words fell like balm upon his trembling heart. Then they pointed his gaze afar, and there Enoch saw something that made every previous wonder seem only a pale prelude. Upon a throne lifted unimaginably high sat the Lord himself, radiant beyond all telling. From this throne poured rivers of boundless light, so intense and holy that even the sun would seem but a fading ember beside it. Can you picture yourself standing there, with trembling breath, beholding the very seat of God's authority? But what of the 10th heaven? For there far above dwells God himself, in a realm named in the Hebrew tongue, Aravoth. It is there that the fullness of the Lord's dwelling radiates without limit. All the heavenly armies ascend to stand upon 10 steps before him, each according to their appointed rank. With profound humility, they bow low before the Lord, then return joyously to their stations, singing in tender, delicate voices that wove the boundless light into songs of praise. How it must stir the soul to witness entire legions delighting only to serve their every melody, a fragrant offering poured out before his throne. Around that throne hovered the cherubim and seraphim, the 6-winged and many-eyed ones who never departed from his presence. With voices soft, yet carrying the weight of eternity, they continually sang before him, "Holy, holy, holy Lord, ruler of hosts. Heaven and earth are full of your glory." Could you hear such a chorus and not feel tears spring unbidden to your eyes, overwhelmed by a holiness that embraces all creation? As Enoch's heart absorbed these staggering wonders, the 2 luminous men turned to him once more. "Enoch," they said, "thus far are we commanded to journey with you." And with that, they departed from his side, fading from his view like mist at dawn. Suddenly, he stood alone at the edge of the 7th heaven, swallowed by a silence so deep it seemed to press upon his very soul. Fear surged through him anew, and he fell upon his face, crying within himself, "Woe is me, what has befallen me now?" But the compassion of the Most High is never far. At once the Lord sent to him one of his most glorious servants, the Archangel Gabriel, whose presence radiated a calm yet immense power. Gabriel spoke with a voice that soothed the trembling heart. "Have courage, Enoch. Do not fear. Arise, stand before the face of the Lord, and come with me into eternity." Yet Enoch, undone by terror and awe, whispered back from within himself, "My Lord, my soul has nearly fled from me because of this trembling. I called upon the men who brought me here, for I trusted in them to lead me before your face. It was a fragile confession, the plea of a man aware of how small he stood before the weight of glory. Without another word, Gabriel reached out and caught him up as lightly as a leaf caught by the wind, lifting him in an effortless sweep and placing him directly before the very face of the Lord. It was then that Enoch's eyes opened to behold the eighth heaven, called in the Hebrew tongue Muzaloth. Here was the changer of seasons, the keeper of drought and of rain, the grand conductor of the 12 constellations that trace their circle above the firmament. Have you ever marveled that each gentle shift from blossom to harvest is woven by hands reaching all the way to such heights? Still Gabriel carried him on. And Enoch saw the ninth heaven, named in the Hebrew tongue Kuchavim, where dwelt the secret homes of the 12 mighty constellations. These bright abodes crowned the circle of the firmament, keeping watch over the dance of time and the unfolding of destinies far below. How many secret threads might tie our own fragile stories to these hidden chambers of light, known only to the God who numbered the stars and calls each by name. At last, Enoch was borne up by the hands of those radiant servants of the Most High to the very summit of all creation, the 10th heaven called Aravoth in the Holy Tongue. It was the loftiest of realms, a place so drenched in pure divinity that all other heavens seemed but pale reflections of its splendor. As he crossed its threshold, a light blazed before him, fierce and living, pouring out torrents of power that made the very air tremble. And there within that boundless glory, Enoch beheld the face of the Lord. The appearance of the Lord's face was like iron drawn from the heart of a furnace, glowing white hot and sending forth bursts of sparks that danced and vanished into the air. It burned with a living brilliance that seemed to consume and yet preserve all things. Enoch beheld it, and his soul quaked within him, for the Lord's face was ineffable, so marvelous, so terrible in its beauty, that even to look was to stand at the edge of unmaking. Who among mortals could dare to describe such unspeakable being? Who could capture the wonder of his very countenance without falling silent in breathless fear? Around the throne of the Lord, there unfolded mysteries without measure. Enoch could not reckon the vast host that stood in reverence before him. Troops of cherubim and seraphim circled without ceasing their voices, rising in sacred song, pouring out worship that would never fade. These mighty ones moved in patterns older than time itself, celebrating his immutable beauty with hymns that wove the fabric of eternity. Can you imagine standing amid such throngs, hearing harmonies that have rung since before the birth of the worlds? And so, Enoch fell upon his face before this overwhelming vision, his whole being undone by awe. The throne of the Lord towered above great, beyond any making of hands. Rivers of light streamed from it, and though countless beings stood about it, mighty angels without number, their presence only magnified the majesty of the one upon it. Who could measure the immensity of such glory, or capture the cadence of so many voices lifting ceaseless praise? Then the Lord, whose voice is like thunder, softened by compassion, spoke to Enoch with his lips. Have courage, Enoch. Do not fear. Arise and stand before my face into eternity. His words wrapped Enoch's quivering heart with strength. At that command, the archangel Michael stepped forward, lifted Enoch gently, and led him before the very face of the Lord. The Lord then turned to his glorious ones and tested their hearts, saying, Let Enoch stand before my face into eternity. And all the radiant hosts bowed low, their voices mingling in a chorus of assent, declaring, Let Enoch go, according to your word. Then the Lord gave his command to Michael, Go take Enoch from his earthly garments, anoint him with my sweet ointment, and clothe him in the garments of my glory." So Michael approached and did exactly as the Lord ordered. He removed from Enoch the frail coverings of mortal life and poured over him the Lord's holy ointment. Its glow surpassed even the great light of the heavens. It fell upon Enoch like sweet dew, sending forth a gentle fragrance shining with the brilliance of the sun's own rays. When Enoch looked upon himself, he found he was transformed, arrayed like one of the glorious ones who stood forever before God. Could you glimpse yourself, so adorned, clothed in garments, woven from divine radiance? Then the Lord summoned another of his great archangels by name, Pravel, whose wisdom was swifter than that of all his brethren. For he wrote down the deeds and mysteries of the Lord. And the Lord said to Pravel, "Bring forth the books from my storehouses, and a reed of quick writing. Place them in Enoch's hands. Give him the choice and comforting scrolls drawn from your treasures." Obediently, Pravel approached Enoch, unfolding before him the hidden works of heaven, earth, and sea, the very architecture of creation. He revealed the paths of the elements, the rumblings of thunder, the courses of the sun and moon, and their wondrous changes, the dance of the stars, and the secrets of seasons, years, days, and hours. He spoke of the breathings of the wind, the numbers of angels, the intricate design of their songs. Then Praviel laid bare all human things, every tongue, every song, every life, all commandments and gentle melodies that teach the soul to rise. Could you stand and hear such mysteries without your spirit bursting with awe? And Pravel said to Enoch, "Sit and write all the souls of mankind, all who shall ever be born, the places prepared for them into eternity. For before the world's foundations were laid, all souls were fashioned for everlasting dwelling." So Enoch wrote diligently, recording all things exactly as they were revealed. For 30 days and 30 nights he labored without pause until he had completed 366 books, each one brimming with the sacred chronicles of creation. At last, the Lord summoned Enoch to himself and said, "Enoch, sit here at my left hand with Gabriel." And Enoch bowed low before the Lord of hosts. Then the Lord spoke again, his voice tender with deep affection. "Enoch, my beloved, all that you see, all things standing complete, I reveal to you. Even before the very beginning, all that I created from what was not invisible, things made visible and physical things drawn forth from the unseen, I tell you now. Hear me, Enoch, and take these words into your heart. For not to my angels have I told these secrets, nor have I revealed to them their own origin, or the endless span of my kingdom. They have not understood my creating, but to you I speak plainly this day. For before anything visible existed, I alone moved among invisible things, like the sun traveling from east to west and back again. But unlike the sun, which finds rest in itself, I found no rest, for I was stirring all things into being. Within me arose the thought to lay foundations and bring forth the visible creation. And so, Enoch's extraordinary ascent through the 10 heavens drew to its close. From realms drenched in celestial brilliance to shadowed prisons holding the sorrow of fallen angels, from the secret treasuries of snow and dew to the countless chambers of the stars, all the way to the very throne of the Most High, Enoch's journey unfolded as a tapestry of wonders beyond what any mortal heart could dream. He stood where human feet had never trod, beheld mysteries no earthly mind could ever fully contain. In those exalted realms, Enoch witnessed the delicate yet mighty order by which God governs creation, the precise courses of the sun and moon, the quiet watch of angelic hosts over rivers, fields, in seasons the songs of innumerable spirits that weave heaven's music. Yet he also saw solemn warnings etched into the fabric of eternity, prisons of darkness holding rebellious angels, places of torment prepared for those who dishonor God and shatter his design. And beyond all terrors and glories alike, he glimpsed the joy reserved for the righteous gardens overflowing with light, tended by angels whose songs are too beautiful to be spoken. Through it all, one truth rose higher than every star and shone clearer than the sun itself. God reigns supreme over all the heavens and the earth. From the deepest shadows to the brightest sanctuaries, his sovereignty stands unchallenged. His justice is unyielding. His mercy reaches beyond measure, and his plans stretch across ages without end. Enoch was chosen to witness these marvels and record them not merely for his own sake, but as a living testimony to all generations, yet unborn, a message written across time's great expanse, echoing as both a warning and a hope. Can we hear it even now? Do our hearts tremble at the judgment awaiting the unrepentant and burn with longing for the reward promised to those who walk in faith? So the question rises to meet each of us with quiet searching force. What will we do with these revelations? Will we turn our hearts toward righteousness, humble ourselves under the mighty hand of God, and prepare for the eternal kingdom that Enoch saw blazing in radiant splendor? Or will we look away content to wander blind among earthly shadows, deaf to the songs of heaven and unmoved by the majesty that once made even Enoch fall trembling to the ground? The ancient writings preserved in the book of Enoch give us a fleeting glimpse of God's unfathomable grandeur, his unwavering justice, and his tender, relentless design for eternity. They stand as a gentle but solemn summons to walk by faith, to seek the Lord with all that we are, so that when our own hour comes to step beyond this mortal horizon, we too might stand before his throne, clothed not in the garments of frail humanity, but in robes of his glory, shining as Enoch was transformed to shine. Thank you, dear friends, for traveling with us through these 10 heavens, for pausing to ponder mysteries that reach beyond time and space. If this journey into the revelations of Enoch has stirred something deep within you, we invite you to like, share, and subscribe, so together we can continue to explore the hidden wonders of God's Word. Until we meet again, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May his face shine upon you and give you peace. Shalom, beloved.